We all have dreams, ambitions, and grand ideas that we want to pursue. However, more often than not, we find ourselves trapped within the confines of self doubt and fear, waiting for someone else to grant us permission. But here's the truth: we don't need anyone else's approval or validation to pursue our dreams. It all begins with granting ourselves the permission to think big and take courageous action. Welcome back one more week to the Leading Yourself podcast. I'm Carolina de Arriba, your host, and today on the podcast, I want to dive into this concept of permission and explore how can we grant ourselves the freedom to pursue our biggest aspirations and dreams. Are you ready? Let's embark in this empowering journey together. Welcome to the Leading Yourself podcast. This is your host, Carolina de Arriba. I'm an HR professional, health and fitness coach, wife, mom, and above all things, a goal-getter. In this podcast, we're going to be digging into all things leadership, professional and career development, habits, and relationships. This is a podcast for those who want to become the best version of themselves. Those who have big dreams and are willing to embrace the journey and put in the work to achieve them. My goal is to share with you the tools, tips, and tricks to help you in your journey. So let's dig into today's episode. Permission plays a significant role in our lives because it empowers us to step out of our comfort zones and embark and embrace the unknown. It's easy to fall into the trap of seeking external validation or waiting for someone else to tell us that it's okay to go after our dreams. But the truth is that no one else knows your dreams and your desires and your aspirations better than you do. Granting yourself permission is about giving yourself the freedom to explore new possibilities, take risks, and embrace personal growth. I remember a little bit over 4 years ago, I had maybe five. I had this like burning desire to start this podcast. However, and I've shared my story many times here on the podcast, I kept waiting for the perfect moment, for the perfect circumstances, and for someone to tell me that I was ready because I was feeling this really strong self doubt at the moment. I was feeling this imposter syndrome. I was, I felt like I wasn't ready to get started. And maybe I wasn't, but deep down, I knew that if I didn't give myself permission to go after my dream, I would never find that fulfillment. And I would always have this voice in the back of my mind of regret for not having pursued something that I really, really wanted. So I made the conscious decision to grant myself that permission, despite the uncertainty, despite the fear, despite the self doubt, despite all of those things. And that's when everything changed. I remember I I just locked myself on my daughter's room and I was holding my phone on my hand and I had downloaded this app. At the time was called Anchor, now is Spotify for podcasters. And I just started recording. And I remember it was a short episode and I recorded at least 10 times. And then I stopped and then I write everything down on a piece of paper because I told myself I'm not a podcaster, but I am a writer because I had wrote a book before, so I'm like, I am a writer, so I'm gonna pull on that to help me here. And I outlined my entire podcast. I wrote it down, and then I started recording as I was reading what I had wrote. I wasn't speaking; I was reading on that first episode, And even when I was reading, I recorded like another 10 times because it did not came the way that I wanted. And let me tell you something. When I go back and listen to episode 1, I felt a little bit embarrassed, but a hell proud of myself, right? I can see how I have evolved, how I have grown since I have started this podcast like 4 years ago. I took action. I faced challenges head on, and eventually I built this successful podcast, right? I have grown so much. I have become a better version of myself because I initially granted myself permission to get started. And I granted myself permission to be a beginner. And I granted myself permission to start even though I wasn't ready or I didn't felt ready. And now I have built this podcast that brings me so much fulfillment, that is so aligned with my passions and my values and what lights me up. And this is one thing that I look forward to every Sunday morning. I jump out of the bed on Sundays to come to my basement and record my podcast. Now with a professional microphone, but still in my pajamas and having lots of fun and continue to grow as an individual, as a podcaster. I am a better version of myself because of this podcast. And that wouldn't have been possible. I wouldn't be who I am today if 4 years ago I didn't grant myself permission to get started, even though I wasn't ready and I wasn't feeling that I was capable of doing it. So, today I want to share with you some steps that can help you to unlock possibilities on how to give yourself permission to go big. Because here's the thing, the only thing sometimes holding us back from pursuing our boldest dreams and ambitions is the need for permission. Whether is seeking validation from others or overcoming our own self-doubt, obtaining permission to go big can be a transformative step towards achieving extraordinary things. So let's explore some practical strategies to gain the permission you need to embrace your aspirations and fulfill your potential. So the first thing is granting yourself permission, right? Is the first and most crucial step towards going big. And it's granting yourself permission, is understanding that you have the power to pursue your dreams without waiting for any kind of external validation. You need to believe in your abilities and trust your instincts. If you want something very badly, pursue it. Grant yourself permission to explore it, to try it out. And I would say also grant yourself permission to be a beginner, because anytime that you start something new, you're not going to be great at it from day one. Maybe you are, but that would be the exception to the rule, right? You need to grow into it. And I think that a lot of people that get past this very first step of saying, okay, I'm going to do it, they have this expectation that is going to be perfect. And they do it while at the same time comparing themselves with others that they aspire to be like or be as good as. And they have this false expectation that the first time they try, they're going to be as good as those role models that they look up to. And that is never going to happen. 99.99% of the times, that is not going to happen. You need to grow and evolve because all these role models that you look up to, they might be in their, chapter 10 or 20 or 100, and you're just in chapter 1 of your journey. So it is important to trust your instincts, follow that desire that you have to pursue that dream. Embrace the mindset that you are worthy of pursuing audacious goals and you deserve success, right? It's about knowing and believing that you're worthy of pursuing it. Not that you will have it on the first try, but you're worthy of pursuing it. And if you put in the work into it and you stick to that thing, you ultimately deserve to be successful, right? Is by giving yourself permission, you can unleash your potential and remove all those self imposed limitations. That first step is just to tell yourself, I grant you permission. Go do it. You are worth it of pursuing this goal, this dream, and you're worthy of being successful on the other side of it. I have a lot of clarity around what I want. For over 5 years, I've been writing down every morning my 10 goals that I want to accomplish in the next 10 years. So I have a lot of clarity and I know top of mind what those things are, but maybe I need to take a step back and before granting yourself permission, you need to acknowledge what are your dreams and desires. Take the time to reflect on your dreams and your desires. What is that you truly want to achieve, to accomplish, to become? It could be a career change, it could be starting a business, it could be pursuing a creative endeavor, or anything that ignites your passion. What is that one thing that you're really drawn to, the one thing that you keep thinking about, that no matter what you do, it always comes back? You know how sometimes you get yourself distracted or busy with your day to day job that you've been doing for the last 3, 5, 10, 20 years. And you're like, no, 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 no. You dismiss that thought and you go back to say, no, but this is my life. This is who I am. This is what I'm good at. This is my safety zone. This is my hard work. And you dismiss these ideas that come to your mind. But no matter how many times you do that, they keep surfacing, they keep coming up. You hear someone talking about something, you listen to a podcast, you read something, you're navigating in the internet, and it's like the universe is sending you signs to remind you of that one thing that you really want, and it always keeps coming up. Maybe it's not that evident, right? Maybe you need to spend more time and think about it because you truly don't know, and there's nothing like that has come to your mind before. It is important to one, get clarity on what is really that you want, and then acknowledge what is that you want. So, here's my question for you today, and I want to invite you to think about this. What is that you truly want? What is that you truly want to achieve, or who is that you want to become, right? It's any of those things. And then what I just described, grant yourself permission. Then the third thing is to challenge your limiting beliefs. Often, our self doubt and our limiting beliefs is what holds us back from granting ourselves permission and go take that courageous action. Because sometimes we tell ourselves, yes, go for it. But then when we're about to take that first step, we're like, oh, no, 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 no. Wait a second. No, you can't do that, right? You you're not ready. You're not meant to do this. You're not going to be good at it. And all these excuses, those all these limiting beliefs start to pop up, and what they do is that they freeze us, right? I was there when I started the podcast. I'm going to keep up with that example. I have so many examples in my life where I have gone through this process. But since you're listening to my podcast, let's use the podcast as our example for today. And hopefully you can relate with something else, whatever it is for you. But for me, I had been thinking about the podcast. I was waiting for that external validation. And one day I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And then I went ahead and tried to do it. And when I was ready to do it and I said the first phrase, the first sentence, I stopped. And all these limiting beliefs started to come to my mind. They were like, what were you thinking? You can do this. This is not meant to be. You're never going to be good at this. No one is going to listen to your podcast. Who wants to listen to what you have to say, right? And that hold me back from really taking the bold action that I needed to take at that moment in order to get started with my dream of becoming a podcaster. So it is important that you identify what are those beliefs that are holding you back and challenge them. And what I have noticed from my own experience is a lot of times if I start here, if I start saying, okay, I know that I have limiting beliefs that are holding me back, and I'm going to make a list. And I sit down and do a list before I do all the other things that I just shared to you. My mind goes blank, right? I don't know what it is. I know that there's something, otherwise I would already be doing the thing that I want to do, but I can't come up with what they are. So sometimes you need to push yourself to say, okay, I'm going to do this and try to do it. And if you freeze in that moment is when you want to grab a piece of paper and start going through, why am I stopping myself? What is the dialogue that is going on in my mind? I feel that that is the moment when it's the easiest to think about and discover and identify what are those limiting beliefs, right? At the moment that you're about to take that step. And it's like, if you were literally taking a step, like you put your right foot up, right? And you're about to put your feet on the floor to take that first step, and it's kind of like you're frozen and you're standing on your left foot and your right foot is floating in the air, and you stop yourself because you're afraid of putting your feet on the floor because you don't know what's going to happen. You feel like you're going to fall or you're going to fail. You're not going to be good enough. You can't walk. This is a metaphor for what happens when we are trying to pursue our big dreams and we're so scared and our limiting beliefs are holding us back. But in that moment, when your foot is floating on the air, there is this internal dialogue that is going in your mind. That is what you want to uncover and unpack and identify, what is it that is holding you back from taking that first step, right? And then replace those negative thoughts with positive affirmations and embrace a growth mindset. And I've shared this before here in the podcast. It's not that all of a sudden you tell yourself, yes, I can walk. Yes, I can walk. Yes, I can walk. Because if you haven't walked before, you don't have evidence that that is true. And if you find an affirmation that you don't have evidence is true for yourself, what is going to happen is that the moment you finish saying to yourself, yes, I can walk, your internal voice is like, who are you kidding? You can't. You've never done it before. And that is when we completely paralyze and we put our foot back where it was and we're back to the starting point. But this time, we're petrified, we're paralyzed, right? So you need to find affirmations. You need to substitute those limiting beliefs with new beliefs that you know are true, things that you truly believe. So, in my case, in my example, I shared a minute ago when I was getting ready for to do my podcast. I told you I recorded it so many times and I keep deleting it. And then I pull into one thing that I knew was true. I can write. And I went ahead and I write what I wanted to say and then I read it. And that's how I recorded the first podcast. That's how I actually completed that first step of recording my very first podcast episode. And after that, many episodes that came after, that was my way forward. I would write everything down and then I would read it to you here on the podcast. Now, 4 years later, maybe I put it outlined, or like today, there's 5, 6 things that I want to talk to you, and I write those 5, 6 things, like one sentence of each of them. So I make sure that I don't forget anything when I'm talking to you. Sometimes I don't even have that. I just come here and I turn record, I press record, and I just start talking and talking and talking. I was having a hard time to record 20-minute episodes. I have a hard time sticking to 35 minutes, which is like my ideal time. Like between 20 and 30 minutes will be ideal because I know that is the average commute that someone has to work. And my goal is that you can listen beginning to end to one podcast episode every time that you're commuting to work. So, challenge your limiting beliefs. The fourth thing is to surround yourself with support. Seek out like minded individuals who believe in your dreams and can provide you support and encouragement along the way. Supporting yourself with a positive network can really help you to stay motivated and stay accountable. I have shared this example before in other episodes in different contexts and applies here again. If you have a goal of running a marathon, right? And you know that you need to train, you can't just show up to the race without having trained before. You need to train, you need to prepare yourself. And if you surround yourself with people that have never run, if you surround with people that every day go to the bar after work to have a beer, that the way they spend their spare time is watching movies and drinking and eating. Nothing wrong with that, but if you want to be a marathon runner, right, that is probably not going to set you for success because anytime you talk about your marathon, they're going to say, what are you talking about? Come here, let's have another beer, right? Every time that you're trying to go train, they're going to say, hey, you're leaving us hanging up. They're going to make you feel guilty not for not being with them, doing the things that you do when you're with them. And you start to feel the social pressure and you start to give up on your dreams because you're distracted by being here with your friends, drinking beer and watching movies. Nothing wrong with that, right? And you can't blame them for not supporting you. They just don't see things from the perspective that you're seeing things. So if you want to become a marathon runner, you surround yourselves with other runners that the thing that they speak about when they talk about when they're together is the best running shoes and what are the best supplements to take to support you in your long runs, the ones that are going to text you at 6 in the morning and tell you, hey, are you ready, let's go train, the ones that are going to go and train with you, that are going to be your accountability partners, that know what it feels to go through that same journey that you're going. Community is so critical when you're pursuing a dream. Surrounding yourself with a network of support is so critical to help you go big and chase your dreams. And if you have tell yourself, yes, I'm worthy of it, and now you surround yourself with the right people, and now you have work on your limiting beliefs, like you're going to succeed. You are going to succeed. You're going to achieve this big thing that you're looking to achieve. It's not a matter of if you will, is a matter of when, right? And that depends on you and how much you put into your dream. Now, the next step, very important, take small steps. Rome wasn't built in one day, and neither will your dreams, right? Break down your goal into smaller, meaningful, manageable steps. Each step forward, no matter how small it is, will build momentum and confidence and will take you one step closer to what you want to be. Here's another time where I see a lot of people giving up, right? They initially give themselves permission and then they pull it back because they feel overwhelmed. They're looking at this big mountain that they want to climb, and they're looking at the top of the mountain. And if they're down here and they've never climbed a mountain before, it can be really overwhelming to the point that you're like, no, you know what? Forget about it. Like all those things, all those limiting beliefs that came up at the beginning, they start to creep back up. The fact that you identify and acknowledge your limiting beliefs and you found new beliefs to substitute those for, if every time that you're trying to make progress, you feel that you're failing, you're just finding more evidence that supports those limiting beliefs. So, what you need to do is to take small steps. You're not going to climb the mountain in one step. You need to take thousands of steps before you get to the top of that mountain. So, take small steps. Break down your goals into smaller, manageable steps and set yourself goals to take the first step. And once you achieve that, your next goal is the second step. And one step at a time, no matter how small those steps are, you're going to start to build momentum. You're going to start to be more confident in yourself. You're going to start to find more evidence that you're actually capable of doing this thing that you were so afraid to do. And the last thing that I want to talk about is embrace failure as a learning opportunity. You need to understand this. Setbacks and failure are part of the journey. You're gonna find setbacks, roadblocks. You're gonna find you're gonna fail many times, and that is part of the journey. I will worry if you don't. If you don't find setbacks and failure along the way to get to your big goal, I will be worried because that means that you haven't yet leave your comfort zone. If you leave your comfort zone, and you need to leave your comfort zone if you're after something that is big and audacious, right? You will fail. But instead of being discouraged anytime that a setback presents itself, every time that you fall, use them as valuable lessons that can propel you closer to your goals. Every time that you fail, start to ask yourself different questions. Like, what what can I learn from this experience? If I fail again in this same thing, what I if I were to do this again, what would I do differently so I don't end up here failing? And remember, failure, it's only failure when you quit. You're either winning, you're either making progress, or you're learning. You're not failing unless you quit. The ultimate failure is quitting to your dreams. And there might be times that you quit a dream and it's not a failure, right? When if you realize after starting your journey, you realize, oh no, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Like when I started my podcast, maybe I started it and then I hate it. What if I hated it? What if I'm like, this is not what I was expecting it to be? Like, I'm not enjoying this. Then quitting would not have been a failure. It would just have been a realization that I was pursuing the wrong goal. But if I were to make mistakes or I were to post like that first podcast episode, there were maybe 4 or 5 people who listened to that when I publish it. And that was like my husband, my parents, my siblings, because I told them, I'm starting this thing. Please go listen to it. And I remember that I would monitor the analytics of my podcast every single day. And I'm like, okay, is there one more person that had listened to the episode? And I became obsessed with it. I'm like, this is a failure. Like, no one is listening to this. And I could have give up in that moment and use that failure to say, okay, I'm done. No one listened to my podcast. I'm giving up. No, I look at it and I'm like, okay, no one is listening to my podcast. That's understandable. Like, I just started and who knows that this podcast exists. And then is when I realized and I learned the lesson that I needed to share it with more people if I wanted more people to know that it even existed and even giving it a try to listen and then decide whether they liked it or not. The fact that no one was listening to that first episode didn't meant that they wouldn't. They just didn't know it existed. And that taught me a lesson. And that lesson pushed me even more outside of my comfort zone. Because I thought, okay, what I want to do is to record the podcast, but the sharing in social media, oh, that's not me. That's not that is not me. Like, that was so outside of my comfort zone. But I learned the lesson that if I wanted to make an impact, if I wanted to make the impact that I had dreamed of through my podcast, I needed people to listen to the podcast. And if I wanted people to listen to the podcast, I had to share it. And I could share it to the people that I knew, but I wanted to speak to more people. And that propelled me to take even bolder action. And I remember I was so afraid when I posted for the first time, like on LinkedIn, that I was doing this podcast because I was like, oh my God, all my peers at work, all my coworkers, what are they going to think? And I was paralyzed again. And then I started this whole cycle all over again, right? I had to acknowledge that I really wanted this, that I really wanted to have a podcast, that I wanted to reach to, my goal is to reach to 1 million people so I can positively impact other people in their own journeys to becoming the best version of themselves. And then I had to identify what were the limiting beliefs holding me back from sharing in social media and replace them with new empowering beliefs that I knew were true. And one of them was, if I want to make the impact that I aspire to make, I need to talk about this. I need people to know about this. Then I surrounded myself with a support network. I joined a group of podcasters and I was learning from them and being encouraged by them. And then I took small steps, right? I shared one time. And then I remember I was looking at social media to say, okay, who liked the post? Who commented on the post? And then I was looking at my analytics. Is it growing? Did one more person listen to the podcast? And at first it was like, no one else is listening to it. And that pulled me back into my old limiting beliefs. And that became a cycle that went on and went on and went on for many times until I started to take more steps and embrace my failure and learn from it and adapt. And that gave me the confidence and the courage to continue to take more steps. And 4 years later, here I am. This year, I was among the top 100 podcasts in this area. I was number 11 in the entire world from all the podcasts that are out there. And I feel so proud of that. But I feel more proud of the journey that I went through to get to this point. And that is just propelling me to continue to want to do more things to add more value to you, because that is at the end my goal. So I hope today's podcast episode was inspiring. Granting yourself permission to go big is personal and it's empowering journey. It's about recognizing your worth, embracing your dreams, taking bold action to make them a reality. Remember, you have the power to unlock your potential and embrace the limitless possibilities that lie ahead. As we come to an end of today's episode, I want to leave you with a final thought. Granting yourself permission to go big is an act of self belief and empowerment. You hold the key to unlock your own potential. Believe in yourself and know that you're capable of achieving greatness. Grant yourself permission to dream fearlessly, to take bold action, and to embrace the incredible possibilities that await you. That concludes our episode today. I hope that you're feeling inspired and empowered to grant yourself permission and go after your dreams. Remember, the power to unlock your potential lies within you. Until the next time, keep dreaming big, keep believing in yourself, and keep unlocking your full potential. If you like today's podcast episode, I'm going to ask you a favor. Please share it with a friend that you think can benefit from today's content. And if you have one extra minute, go to whatever platform you're listening to this podcast and leave a review. That helps to push the podcast to more people so more people know that this podcast exists. And by you doing that, you are becoming my support network to achieve my dream that I hope is helping in your own journey to achieve yours. Until next time, have a great week, and I'll talk to you next Monday on a new episode of the Leading Yourself podcast.